It started like a perfect love story. Adam and Rachel had a whirlwind romance, one of those once-in-a-lifetime connections that felt like fate. He was drawn to her effortless charm, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence, and that mysterious glint in her eye that made him feel like she knew something the rest of the world didn't. They met, they fell hard, and within months they were married. Their wedding photos painted a picture of pure happiness, Rachel in a delicate lace gown, Adam beaming at her like he had just won the lottery. To their friends and family, they were the definition of newlywed bliss. But just days after their wedding, Rachel disappeared without a trace. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. At first, Adam thought it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she had an emergency. Maybe she needed space. But then the days stretched into weeks, and the silence became deafening. Her phone was disconnected. Her social media wiped clean. There was no record of her boarding a flight or checking into a hotel. It was as if Rachel had never existed. Desperate for answers, Adam began retracing her steps, searching through her things, hoping for any clue that might explain why his wife had vanished. That's when he found the first crack in her perfect image. Small inconsistencies, documents that didn't add up, stories that didn't match, tiny details that seemed off. And then, buried in the back of her closet, he found something that made his blood run cold. Rachel wasn't who she said she was. The woman he married had secrets dark, tangled, and carefully hidden. And as Adam dug deeper, he realized he had only scratched the surface. The truth was far more twisted than he ever could have imagined. But by the time he finally uncovered who Rachel really was, it was already too late. What had she been running from? And more importantly, where was she now? Adam couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The woman he had married, the woman he thought he knew, was a stranger. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Rachel had seemed completely normal, or at least that's what he told himself. But looking back, there were moments that didn't make sense. She had been restless, checking over her shoulder in public, locking doors that never needed locking before. There were times when she seemed lost in thought, distant, almost like she was waiting for something to happen. Adam had asked her about it once, joking that she seemed more paranoid than usual. Rachel had just laughed it off and said, "Old habits die hard." He hadn't thought much of it then. Now that offhand comment played over and over in his mind, like a warning he hadn't taken seriously enough. Determined to find answers, Adam started piecing together the last days before Rachel vanished. She had left work early the day before, something she never did. Her boss at the marketing firm she worked at said she seemed distracted, making mistakes she never usually made. When Adam checked their shared bank account, he saw that she had withdrawn a significant amount of cash, a couple $1,000 just days before the wedding, money that was completely unaccounted for. Then there were the calls. Late at night, when she thought Adam was asleep, Rachel would step out onto the balcony and whisper into her phone. He had caught bits and pieces, fragments of conversations that didn't make sense. "No, not yet," she had said one night. "It's not safe." Another time, she simply listened, nodding along to whoever was on the other end, before sighing and saying, "I understand." At the time, Adam had assumed it was just work stress, or maybe a friend confiding in her. Now, those late-night whispers felt like clues he had ignored, signals that his wife was entangled in something far bigger than either of them. The more Adam searched, the stranger things became. One of Rachel's closest friends, Megan, seemed shaken when he asked if she had noticed anything unusual. She hesitated before answering, choosing her words carefully. Rachel was complicated, Megan finally admitted. She didn't always tell people everything. But she cared about you. I know she did. That wasn't the answer Adam was looking for. If Rachel had secrets, how deep did they go? And how many people knew the truth about her? The more Adam pressed, the more he realized no one was willing to say too much. It was as if Rachel's past was something everyone had agreed to forget, something dangerous to dig up. Then there was the man who had been lingering near their apartment building, someone Adam had never seen before. The night after Rachel disappeared, Adam spotted him again standing in the shadows, watching. But as soon as Adam made eye contact, the man turned and walked away, vanishing into the crowd. Was he connected to Rachel's disappearance? Or was Adam just seeing threats where there were none? Every new detail seemed to create more questions than answers. The police weren't much help without evidence of foul play. They treated Rachel's disappearance as voluntary, assuming she had simply left on her own. People have their reasons, the detective had told Adam with a shrug. Sometimes they just don't want to be found. But that didn't sit right with him. Rachel had promised him forever. She had talked about their future, about starting a family, about growing old together. None of this made sense. The Rachel he knew wouldn't just walk away unless the Rachel he knew had never really existed. Then late one night, just when Adam was beginning to lose hope, he received an email from an anonymous sender. No message, no explanation, just an attachment. With shaking hands, he clicked it open, and what he saw made his stomach drop. It was a surveillance photo, grainy black and white, but there was no mistaking it. Rachel. She was alive. But she wasn't alone. And the man standing next to her? Adam had never seen him before in his life. Adam stared at the grainy image on his screen, his pulse pounding in his ears. Rachel was alive, but she wasn't in trouble, at least, not in the way he had feared. She wasn't bound, she wasn't running, she wasn't looking over her shoulder in panic. She was standing next to a man he didn't recognize, her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable. Who was he? A friend? A stranger? A threat? Adam zoomed in, trying to make out more details, but the image was too low quality to reveal much. The timestamp in the corner showed that it had been taken just a day after she had vanished. Wherever Rachel was, she hadn't just disappeared, she had chosen to walk away. But why? And who had sent this to him? Before Adam could think, he typed out a reply, demanding answers. But when he hit send, the email bounced back undeliverable. The sender was gone, just like Rachel. Determined more than ever to find out the truth, Adam printed the photo and took it to the police, hoping it would be enough to reopen the case. But instead of getting the reaction he expected, the detective barely glanced at it before sighing. "Like I said, people leave," he muttered, pushing the paper back toward Adam. "She's not missing. She just doesn't want to be found." The words made Adam's blood boil. How could they be so dismissive? How could they look at that image, the woman he loved, the woman who had promised to spend her life with him, and act like it didn't matter? Frustrated, he decided to take things into his own hands. He would find Rachel himself. He had no choice. But just as he was making progress, the first real obstacle appeared. One morning, Adam woke up to find his apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, not his wallet, not his laptop, not even the cash sitting in the kitchen drawer, but the box of Rachel's belongings he had been sorting through. Gone. Every trace of her, every clue he had collected, had been taken. The police brushed it off as a random burglary, but Adam knew better. Someone wanted him to stop looking, and they were making sure he had nothing left to go on. Then there was Megan. Rachel's friend had seemed hesitant before, but now she was outright avoiding him. Calls went to voicemail. Texts were left unread. And when he finally caught her outside her office, her reaction sent a chill down his spine. "Adam, listen to me," she whispered, her voice low, her eyes darting around as if someone might be watching. "You have to stop. You don't know what you're getting into." The fear in her voice was real. It wasn't the kind of concern a friend had for someone grieving a lost spouse. It was something else. Something deeper. Who was Rachel really? Adam pressed, refusing to let her slip away again. Megan swallowed hard, stepping back, shaking her head. She wasn't who you think she was. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Adam with more questions than ever. Rachel had secrets people were willing to steal for, maybe even hurt for. But Adam wasn't backing down. He retraced his steps, going back to Rachel's favorite spots, hoping for anything: a familiar face, a clue, a lead. That's when he saw it. A car, parked across the street from his apartment. He had seen it before, always in different places, but never far from him. At first, he'd ignored it, brushing it off as coincidence. But now, as he locked eyes with the driver, a man in dark sunglasses, stone-faced, unmoving, he knew. He was being watched. Adam's breath caught in his throat as his phone buzzed in his pocket. A new text. No name. No number. Just 3 words that made his stomach drop. Walk away now. Adam's fingers tightened around his phone as he read the message again, his heart hammering in his chest. Walk away now. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. But from who? The man in the car? Whoever had broken into his apartment? Or was it the same person who had sent the surveillance photo of Rachel? He turned his gaze back to the vehicle, but the driver didn't move. No flicker of recognition, no shift in expression, just an unwavering stare through dark sunglasses. Then, as if satisfied that the message had been delivered, the man started the engine and pulled away, disappearing into the steady flow of traffic. Adam wanted to chase him, to demand answers, but deep down he knew that whoever was behind this had no intention of being found. They were watching him, keeping him on a leash. And the moment he got too close to something he wasn't supposed to know, they would tighten their grip. Before Adam could process his next move, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an anonymous number. It was his sister, Emily. He hesitated before answering, still rattled, but the second he heard the panic in her voice, his own fear took a backseat. "Adam, something's wrong," she said. Her words rushed, frantic. "Someone broke into my house." His stomach twisted. "Not again. Are you hurt? Did you see who it was?" he asked, already grabbing his keys and heading for the door. Emily's breathing was shaky, uneven. "No, I wasn't home when it happened." But Adam, they didn't take anything. Except for one thing. His grip on the phone tightened. "What?" A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, Emily said, "The wedding photo of you and Rachel. The one on my mantle. It's gone." A cold wave of realization crashed over him. This wasn't random. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare him, they were sending a message. They wanted him to know they were in control, that they could reach beyond just him, that even his family wasn't safe. But why that photo? Why not something valuable, something worth stealing? Unless it wasn't about the photo itself, but what it might have contained. A face in the background? A detail he had overlooked. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because Rachel wasn't just hiding from someone, she was hiding something. Adam arrived at Emily's house within minutes, his heart pounding, his mind racing through every possibility. The door hadn't been forced open, no windows shattered. Whoever had done this had been careful, precise. A professional. Inside, Emily stood by the empty space on the mantel, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression unreadable. "This isn't normal, Adam," she murmured, shaking her head. "This feels personal." He didn't disagree. Then, something else caught his eye. On the coffee table, half buried under a stack of unopened mail, was an envelope that hadn't been there before. Plain, white, unmarked. He exchanged a look with Emily before carefully picking it up and tearing it open. Inside was a single photograph, and the second he saw it, his blood ran cold. It was the same surveillance image that had been emailed to him, the same grainy shot of Rachel standing beside the unknown man. But this one had been altered. A red X was now drawn over Rachel's face. And underneath, scrawled in jagged black ink, was a single sentence that made his hands shake. "She's not yours to find." Adam's breath came in short, uneven bursts as he turned the photo over, hoping for anything that could tell him where this had come from. But there was nothing. No signature, no address, no clue. Just a chilling confirmation that he wasn't the only one looking for Rachel. And if he didn't stop now, whoever sent this was making it clear they wouldn't just come after him. They would go after anyone who got in their way. But walking away wasn't an option. Not now. Not after this. If Rachel had truly chosen to disappear, if she had left to protect herself, why was someone working so hard to erase every trace of her? Why threaten him if all they wanted was for her to stay hidden? And why did he have the sickening feeling that, whatever game he had just stepped into, he wasn't the one making the rules? Somewhere out there, Rachel had answers. But the more Adam searched, the more dangerous the truth became. And as he stood in his sister's living room, clutching that ominous photograph, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already in too deep. Adam had always thought of fear as something distant, an abstract emotion that crept up in fleeting moments, but never truly took hold. But now, standing in the wreckage of his own unraveling reality, he understood what real fear felt like. It wasn't just the eerie sensation of being watched, or the knowledge that someone had invaded his life. It was the slow, suffocating realization that he was losing control, that whoever was behind this wasn't just playing a game. They were orchestrating something far more deliberate. And now, they had made their next move. It happened later that night, long after he had left Emily's house. He drove for hours with no real destination, too wired to sleep, too unsettled to go home. The city around him felt unfamiliar, its streets darker than usual, the people who passed by just shadows in his peripheral vision. He told himself he was being paranoid, that he was imagining the weight of unseen eyes pressing in on him. But as he pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of a gas station, that illusion shattered. The car was there again, the same dark sedan, parked 2 rows over, headlights off, just sitting there like a patient predator, waiting for the right moment to strike. Adam's pulse pounded in his ears as he forced himself to stay calm. He had 2 choices: confront whoever was inside or walk away. The smarter option was obvious, but Adam had reached his breaking point. If they wanted him scared, they had already won. But if they wanted him to back down, they were about to be disappointed. He stepped out of his car, the cool night air rushing over his skin as he squared his shoulders and marched toward the vehicle. But just as he reached it, the engine roared to life. The car peeled out of the lot, tires screeching against the pavement as it disappeared into the night. Adam barely had time to react before he felt the vibration in his pocket, his phone buzzing with an incoming call. No caller ID. His throat tightened as he hesitated, but deep down, he already knew he had no choice but to answer. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical, warped into something unrecognizable. "You should have listened," it said, calm, almost amused. "But now, you're running out of time." Adam swallowed hard, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles ached. "Who are you?" he demanded, but the voice continued as if he hadn't spoken. "You want the truth? Fine, but you won't like what you find." A pause. A breath. Then the final blow. "Check your apartment." The call went dead. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to drive anywhere but home. But the part of him that had started this search, the part of him that refused to believe Rachel had simply vanished, forced his hands onto the wheel and his foot onto the gas. By the time he reached his apartment building, his skin was damp with sweat. His nerves pulled so tight, he felt like they might snap. The parking lot was empty. Too empty. The whole street felt eerily quiet, the kind of silence that didn't belong in a city that never truly slept. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the door, pushing it open with slow, deliberate caution. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. The couch, the kitchen, the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds, it was all exactly as he had left it. But then his eyes landed on the dining table, and the bottom dropped out of his stomach. A single object sat there, perfectly centered. His wedding ring. Adam's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen that ring since the day Rachel disappeared. It had been on her finger when she left. And now, somehow, it was here. Someone had been inside. Someone had left this for him. But before the panic could fully take hold, he noticed something else. The wall behind the table, pristine white just hours ago, was now smeared with something dark, something uneven. His legs felt like lead as he stepped closer, his mind already screaming at him to stop. And then he saw the message, written in thick, dripping strokes. STOPDIGGING. A chill ran through him so violently he thought he might collapse. This wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. Someone had gone to great lengths to show him just how deep their reach was, how easily they could slip past locks and walls and boundaries. This wasn't just about Rachel's disappearance. It was about control. Adam had spent days searching for the truth. But now, the truth was coming for him, and he wasn't sure he was ready for what it had to say. Adam stood frozen in the doorway, his breath shallow, his pulse roaring in his ears. The sight of his wedding ring, the chilling message smeared across his wall, it was too much, too precise. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching him, they were controlling the game, pulling the strings with terrifying precision. And yet, through the suffocating weight of fear, something gnawed at him. A thought, a question, the wedding ring. If Rachel had left it behind, then someone had taken it off her finger. But Rachel had never removed that ring, not even when she slept, which meant she hadn't left it behind at all. Someone had it, someone close, and now they wanted him to know it. Then his phone buzzed again. Not an unknown number this time, not a cryptic message. It was Megan. Rachel's best friend, the one who had warned him to stop searching, the one who had been avoiding him ever since. His fingers hovered over the screen before he answered, his voice low, tense. Megan? For a second, all he could hear was her breathing, shaky and uneven. Then, in a whisper so soft he barely caught it, she said, "I can't do this anymore." Adam's stomach twisted. "Megan, what's going on?" A pause. Then she said something that shattered everything he thought he knew. "She lied to you, Adam." Rachel lied about everything. The air in his lungs turned to ice. He gripped the phone tighter, his body rigid. "What are you talking about?" But Megan was already unraveling, the dam of whatever secret she had been holding back finally breaking. "I thought I was helping her. I thought she was in danger. But it wasn't like that." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know what she was running from until it was too late. And now they know I told you too much." Adam's mind spun, trying to latch onto something, anything that made sense. "Who?" he demanded. "Who are they?" A car engine rumbled in the background on her end. Megan was moving fast. "I can't say over the phone," she whispered. "Meet me at the line went dead." The silence stretched on, thick and unbearable. Adam stared at his phone, his fingers shaking. Megan was terrified. Not just scared, terrified. And the way she had spoken about Rachel, the weight in her voice. It wasn't about someone being kidnapped. It wasn't about Rachel being a victim. It was about something else. Something darker. For the first time since this nightmare began, a terrible thought lodged itself in Adam's mind. What if Rachel wasn't running from someone? What if she was the one being hidden? Adam grabbed his keys and rushed out of his apartment, not caring about the eerie emptiness of the street, not checking to see if the dark sedan had returned. He had to find Megan before it was too late. But as he sped through the city, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The entire time, he had been looking for Rachel, convinced that she was the key to everything. But what if Rachel wasn't the answer? What if she was the problem? Adam's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his fingers ached, but he barely noticed. His mind was a storm of questions, doubts, and the sinking feeling that he had been playing someone else's game from the beginning. Rachel lied. Megan knew more than she let on. And now, someone had made sure Megan couldn't talk. The silence on the other end of that dead call echoed in his head, gnawing at him. Had she been taken? Killed? Or had she simply vanished, just like Rachel? And if that was the case, was it because she ran, or because someone made her disappear? He needed answers, but every turn he took only led to more confusion, more missing pieces. He had chased the idea of Rachel as a victim for so long that he hadn't considered what Megan had been about to say. What if she wasn't? His stomach churned at the thought, but deep down, the signs had always been there. The half-truths, the inconsistencies in her stories, the way she always seemed to be one step ahead. And now, Megan's cryptic warning. Rachel had been running, but not just from someone. From something. From the truth. His phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. This time, it wasn't a call, it was a message. A blocked number. No name, no sender. Just 6 words that sent a shiver through his spine. STOPORSHEDIESNEXT. The weight of it slammed into him like a punch to the gut. His breath hitched, his fingers tightening around the phone. She. Did they mean Megan? Was she still alive? Or was this about Rachel? Did someone else have her now? Or worse, had she never really been missing at all? A sharp knock at his window made him jolt. His heart pounded as he turned, expecting to see the dark sedan again, another faceless warning sent to shut him down. But instead, standing outside his car, was the last person he expected. Detective Carter. Carter had been the lead investigator when Rachel first disappeared, the one who had told Adam over and over that there was no evidence of foul play, that Rachel had left willingly, that there was nothing more to look into. And yet, here he was, standing on a nearly deserted street in the middle of the night, his expression unreadable. Adam hesitated before rolling down the window, trying to mask the panic surging through him. Detective? His voice was hoarse, uncertain. Carter's gaze flickered toward Adam's phone, as if he already knew exactly what message had just appeared on his screen. Get out of the car, he said, his tone flat, unwavering. It wasn't a request. Adam's pulse hammered in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to say no, to drive away, to keep moving before he ended up like Rachel. Or Megan. But Carter wasn't just some stranger lurking in the shadows. He was a cop. Someone who had access to information Adam didn't. Someone who had been watching this case from the start. Maybe, just maybe, he had the answers Adam so desperately needed. Adam's hands shook as he stared at the key resting in his palm, the metal cold against his skin. Rachel's key. The one she never went anywhere without. The one that had been around her neck the night she disappeared. Now it was here, in his possession, handed to him by a man who had spent months convincing him there was nothing left to find. But Carter hadn't said it was over. He hadn't told Adam to move on. He had given him a choice. Stop now, or step into something he couldn't come back from. The night pressed in around him, thick and suffocating, but Adam knew there was no turning back. If this key still existed, it meant Rachel had left something behind, something she never wanted anyone to find. And someone with power, had spent all this time making sure it stayed buried. His mind reeled as he slid back into the driver's seat, gripping the key so tightly, it left an imprint in his palm. The only question now was, where did it go? And then it hit him. Rachel's storage unit. It was something she had gotten before they were married, a place for old college books, furniture from her first apartment, things she swore she'd get rid of, but never did. At the time, Adam hadn't thought much of it, just another forgotten space collecting dust. But now, after everything, it couldn't be a coincidence. If she had hidden something, that's where it would be. He drove like a man possessed, ignoring speed limits, barely registering the city lights streaking past him. The storage facility sat just outside town, tucked away in an industrial lot that felt eerily deserted this late at night. As he pulled in, his headlights swept over rows of metal doors, each one identical to the next. His pulse pounded as he climbed out of the car, gripping the key so tightly his fingers ached. The unit was near the back. He found it easily, the number burned into his memory, despite not having been here in years. His breath was shallow as he slid the key into the lock, half expecting it not to fit, for this to be some kind of elaborate mind game. But it turned with an unsettling ease, the padlock clicking open in his hand. He hesitated for only a second before pulling the door up. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing boxes stacked neatly along the walls, untouched for years. At first glance, nothing looked out of place, but Adam knew better. Rachel hadn't risked everything for old furniture and forgotten keepsakes. Something was here, something worth hiding. He moved quickly, yanking open boxes, tossing aside papers, searching for anything that stood out. And then, beneath an old suitcase, he found a small black safe. His breath caught as he dropped to his knees, dragging it into the light. It had a combination lock, but Adam didn't hesitate. He knew Rachel, knew the way she thought. And sure enough, when he entered their anniversary date, the lock clicked open. Inside, there were documents, files, a burner phone, and a flash drive. His fingers trembled as he grabbed the papers first, flipping through them in the dim light. Bank statements, travel itineraries, passports, but not just Rachel's. There were other names, names he didn't recognize. And then, a photograph slid loose from the pile, one that sent his stomach into freefall. Rachel, sitting in a cafe, laughing, and across from her Detective Carter. The room spun. His grip tightened on the paper, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. Carter had known Rachel, not as an investigator, not after she went missing, but before, long before. And if that was true, then everything he had been told was a lie. A metallic click echoed behind him. Adam went rigid. "Step away from the safe," a voice commanded. He knew that voice. Slowly, heart hammering against his ribs, he turned. And there, standing in the doorway, gun raised, was Megan. Her expression was unreadable calm, almost detached, as if she had already made peace with what she had to do. "I told you to stop, Adam," she said softly. "You should have listened." The truth crashed into him like a freight train. Megan had never been on his side. She hadn't been scared. She had been covering for Rachel. And now, he was next. "You said." The city stretched out before Adam as he drove, the neon lights bleeding into the wet pavement, blurring in his exhausted vision. His hands gripped the wheel like a lifeline, the weight of everything that had happened, pressing down on him like a force he could barely withstand. The burner phone sat in the passenger seat, its presence almost unreal, as if it had materialized from a fever dream. Rachel was alive. The words still hadn't fully settled in his mind. After everything, after the night spent chasing ghosts, the lies, the betrayals, she was out there. But for how much longer? He had bought himself seconds, nothing more. Slowly, he shut off the engine and stepped out, his muscles tight with tension. Carter didn't speak at first, just studied him with an expression Adam couldn't quite read. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I told you to let this go." His jaw clenched. I told you she wasn't coming back." Adam swallowed hard. "And I didn't listen." Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. "No, you didn't." He took a slow step forward, lowering his voice even more. "Now you have a choice, Adam. You either stop tonight, or you're gonna find out why people like you don't get second chances." Adam's blood turned to ice. "People like me?" Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, and for a brief, stomach-dropping moment, Adam thought he was going for his gun. But instead, he pulled out something smaller. Something Adam recognized instantly. A key. Rachel's key. The one she had always kept on her necklace. The one she never went anywhere without. Adam's breath caught in his throat. "Where did you get that?" Carter tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Like I said," he murmured, "you don't get second chances." Then, without another word, he placed the key in Adam's hand, turned on his heel, and walked away. Adam stared down at the metal, resting in his palm, his mind spinning, his heartbeat a frantic drum in his chest. He was no longer just searching for Rachel. He was being led to her. But by who? And why now? One thing was certain: whoever had started this game had just raised the stakes. And Adam wasn't sure if he was playing to win anymore, or if he was just being played. Adam's hand shook as he stared at the key resting in his palm, the metal cold against his skin. Rachel's key. The one she never went anywhere without. The one that had been around her neck the night she disappeared. Now it was here, in his possession, handed to him by a man who had spent months convincing him there was nothing left to find. But Carter hadn't said it was over. He hadn't told Adam to move on. He had given him a choice. Stop now, or step into something he couldn't come back from. The night pressed in around him, thick and suffocating, but Adam knew there was no turning back. If this key still existed, it meant Rachel had left something behind, something she never wanted anyone to find. And someone with power, had spent all this time making sure it stayed buried. His mind reeled as he slid back into the driver's seat, gripping the key so tightly it left an imprint in his palm. The only question now was, where did it go? And then it hit him. Rachel's storage unit. It was something she had gotten before they were married, a place for old college books, furniture from her first apartment, things she swore she'd get rid of, but never did. At the time, Adam hadn't thought much of it, just another forgotten space collecting dust. But now, after everything, it couldn't be a coincidence. If she had hidden something, that's where it would be. He drove like a man possessed, ignoring speed limits, barely registering the city lights streaking past him. The storage facility sat just outside town, tucked away in an industrial lot that felt eerily deserted this late at night. As he pulled in, his headlights swept over rows of metal doors, each one identical to the next. His pulse pounded as he climbed out of the car, gripping the key so tightly, his fingers ached. The unit was near the back. He found it easily, the number burned into his memory, despite not having been here in years. His breath was shallow as he slid the key into the lock, half expecting it not to fit, for this to be some kind of elaborate mind game. But it turned with an unsettling ease, the padlock clicking open in his hand. He hesitated for only a second before pulling the door up. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing boxes stacked neatly along the walls, untouched for years. At first glance, nothing looked out of place. But Adam knew better. Rachel hadn't risked everything for old furniture and forgotten keepsakes. Something was here. Something worth hiding. He moved quickly, yanking open boxes, tossing aside papers, searching for anything that stood out. And then, beneath an old suitcase, he found it, a small, black safe. His breath caught as he dropped to his knees, dragging it into the light. It had a combination lock, but Adam didn't hesitate. He knew Rachel, knew the way she thought. And sure enough, when he entered their anniversary date, The lock clicked open. Inside, there were documents, files, a burner phone, and a flash drive. His fingers trembled as he grabbed the papers first, flipping through them in the dim light. Bank statements, travel itineraries, passports, but not just Rachel's. There were other names. Names he didn't recognize. And then, a photograph slid loose from the pile, one that sent his stomach into freefall. Rachel, sitting in a cafe. The call had given her just enough time to know she was compromised. Carter would be hunting her now, and Megan, who had spent all this time pretending to be his ally, who had stood there with a gun aimed at his chest, what would she do? Would she keep covering for Rachel, or was her loyalty still tied to the organization that had controlled them both for so long? That was the question he didn't have time to answer. All he knew was that he had to find Rachel first. The GPS coordinates she sent were cryptic, just a set of numbers with no explanation. But Adam didn't hesitate. His hands were still raw from the struggle at the storage unit. His ribs ached from Carter's attack, and the fear still clung to him like a second skin. But none of that mattered. If Rachel had risked reaching out, she was in danger. And after everything, after unknowingly leading them straight to her, he had to make it right. The miles blurred together, leading him deep into the outskirts of the city, past the industrial lots and forgotten warehouses. The address led to a motel, a run-down, flickering neon kind of place, the kind where people disappeared without anyone asking questions. Adam pulled into the lot, his heart hammering. The moment he stepped out of the car, he felt its eyes on him. He moved quickly, his steps quiet against the rain-slick pavement. The door to room 107 was already ajar, just enough to let him know he was expected. He pushed it open, stepping into the dim glow of a single bedside lamp. And then, there she was. Rachel. She stood by the window, her face thinner than he remembered, her hair darker, as if she had been living in shadows for so long they had started to claim her. But her eyes, those same eyes he had fallen in love with, locked onto his, with a mix of relief and something else. Regret. "Adam?" she breathed, barely more than a whisper. He didn't speak. Couldn't. The emotions were too tangled, too raw. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, and none of them felt like this. "I tried to keep you out of it," she said, stepping closer, her voice thick with something that sounded like guilt. "I thought if I disappeared, you'd be safe." His throat tightened. "You knew they'd come for you." She nodded, and for the first time, he saw the full weight of what she had been carrying. "I took something from them, Adam. Something they can't afford to let go." Her hands clenched at her sides. "I was part of it, just like Megan, just like Carter. But when I found out what they were really doing..." Her voice broke for a second, and she shook her head. "I couldn't be part of it anymore. So I ran." She let out a bitter laugh. "Turns out, I wasn't fast enough." Adam took a step closer, searching her face for the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. "What did you take?" She hesitated, then reached for her bag. From inside, she pulled out a hard drive, no bigger than his palm. Names. Transactions. Proof of what they've done. She met his eyes. "It's not just a cover-up, Adam. It's not just about me. They've been silencing people for years. People who got too close, people who asked the wrong questions. If this gets out, their entire operation falls apart." A heavy silence filled the room. "They'll never stop looking for you," he said, the reality sinking in. "For us." Rachel swallowed hard. "I know." A beat passed, and then a noise outside. Footsteps. A shadow shifting against the thin curtain. They had been found. Rachel moved first, grabbing her bag, tucking the drive into her pocket. "We have to go." "Now?" Adam's pulse pounded as they moved in sync, slipping out the back just as voices filled the hallway. They ran, their feet splashing against the wet pavement, the cold air biting at their skin. Somewhere behind them, Carter's voice rang out, sharp, commanding. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the chase began. As they reached the car, Rachel turned to him, her breath fogging in the cold night air. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding rain. "Once we do this once, we expose them, there's no coming back." Adam met her gaze, and for the first time since this nightmare had begun, he knew his answer. He had to see this through. Not just for Rachel, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been silenced before them. He nodded, gripping the wheel as she climbed in beside him. The tires screeched against the pavement as they tore out of the lot, headlights cutting through the darkness. Behind them, figures emerged, silhouetted by the flickering motel sign. The hunt wasn't over. Not yet. But as they disappeared into the night, one thing was clear. For the first time, they weren't running away. They were running toward the truth.